Creativity Unleashed, a practical example. I'm rereading this book, Most Likely to Succeed. And right away, there's a few examples. See, the world-class innovators, they tend to, I call it ask more questions about more things from more angles and with more persistence. They tend to find and then pursue better questions. But it starts with they actually ask more questions. They see something and say, wait a second. And they might say, is that working? Or what is that working towards? And right early on in this book, there's this question of what's the purpose of school? And they said, we've talked to all these schools and asked this question, our school's overarching priority is, and then to give them four choices. And I want you to think about it. I challenge you to think about this in terms of you're a CEO of a company, or you're a superintendent or a principal of a school, or you're a teacher, or you're a parent, or you're a coach, you run a sport, whatever. You manage a department. I want you to think about this. Our school's overarching priority is, and you could ask this in your own world, our family's overarching priority is. As a CEO, my overarching priority, right? And here are the four in the school. A, cover content. B, help students discover their passions and purpose. C, help students develop cognitive and social skills, get better at thinking, right? Analyzing, critical thinking, you could say, and connections, relationships, social, emotional learning, emotional intelligence, right? That's C. And D, help students form character and be responsible citizens, right? So they ask these four questions, and they say, we asked the leaders in the school, and they say, oh, wow, it's B and C and D. It's B and C and D, right? B, discover passion and purpose. C, develop cognitive and social skills. D, help develop character, become responsible students, citizens. And then they say, well, wait, we look at the curriculum and the way time is spent and energy is spent and what the kids say. And the answer on that side is a resounding A, cover content. See, the most creative people on the planet, world-class innovators, they tend to ask more questions about more things from more angles, and with more persistence. Right? Well, let me fast forward then, because, I love to read a book as a mirror and say, wow, it's so easy to read it as a window and say, wow, look at what they're doing. But as a mirror, it says, whoa, hold on a second. Maybe you're doing this somewhere. Then fast forward, one page, and they talk about this school, world famous school, one of the best college prep schools on the planet. I think the tuition is like $80,000. It's outside of Philadelphia in New Jersey. It's called the Lawrenceville School. And they say they've been consistently rated as one of the best college prep schools in existence. Well, this school at one point stepped back, and they've been in business almost 200 years. They stepped back and they said, how are we doing at what we're doing, right? Ask more questions about more things with more, from more angles. How are we really doing? How are we really doing with what we're trying to do? And they said, well, let's take a look at the final exams, and then let's have kids take the same exact final exam 3 months later, right? Because they take it at the end of the school year. Let's say it's middle of June. Let's have them take the same final exam again in the middle of September. So they have July and August and September, right? 3 months later. And they find that the students' grades on that final exam go from about an average of a 90 to an average of in the 50s, below a 60. And they said, wait a second, maybe that's fine, right? They could say that, or they could ask a question. They could say, is what we're doing working? Is that acceptable? They could say, is that normal, right? They could say, is that just how it is? Or they could say, should we rethink some of how we teach? And they effectively decided that since the kids were losing not quite, but close to half of their learning, right? Go back to this question of, is the priority to cover content? If the priority is to cover content, you probably don't take much out. But if the priority is to help these kids really, develop, if it's a different priority, then you say, wait a second. And this school, the Lawrenceville School, said, why don't we get rid of half the content we cover in the year and cover it more deeply and cover it in a way that it helps shape the way these kids see the world. If we're going to cover history, we can cover all of this, or we could cover half the things, half the content, but with a greater depth. If you were in that situation, what decisions would you consider? How would you approach, dive into the movie Lincoln as an example and say, well, if you were sitting there in Lincoln's shoes saying, I have a couple options, right in the beginning of the movie, you haven't seen. Anyway, the point is, world-class innovators, they tend to ask more questions about more things from more angles and with more persistence. And this book is just a beautiful, beautiful, it's full of incredible examples of that. I hope this challenges you. I hope it inspires you. I hope you find it thought-provoking. Keep leading, keep serving.